Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a season where nothing is happening? Like you've been praying, working, believing, yet the doors you expected to open remain closed? What if I told you that God is not punishing you, but preparing you? Because before God places you, he prepares you. God does not promote unprepared people. Before God gives you the opportunity, he shapes you for it. Before he expands your influence, he deepens your character. Before he brings you into a new level, he strengthens the foundation that will hold you there. Too often we want the result without the refinement, the promise without the process. But God is more concerned with who we are becoming than with what we are achieving. He will not put you in a position that your character cannot sustain. Think about David. When the prophet Samuel anointed him as king, David was still a shepherd boy. He received a divine promise, but he didn't step into the palace overnight. In fact, after being anointed, he went back to the fields. He continued tending sheep, serving his father and living in obscurity. That doesn't seem like the journey of a king. It seems like a delay. But what looked like delay was actually preparation. David was learning leadership while no one was watching. He was learning to fight battles against lions and bears so that when he faced Goliath, he wouldn't flinch. He was learning to be faithful in the small things so that when God gave him greater responsibility, he wouldn't abuse it. Imagine if David had rushed the process. Imagine if the moment he was anointed, he demanded to be king. He wouldn't have been ready. He wouldn't have had the wisdom, the patience, the humility that only seasons of preparation can cultivate. So many of us want to walk into our destiny now. We say, God, I'm ready. Open the door. Give me the opportunity. Elevate me. But what if God is saying, I'm not withholding this from you. I'm preparing you for it. If he gave it to you too soon, you might mishandle it. If he placed you in a position of influence before you had the maturity to steward it, it could destroy you. This is why preparation precedes promotion. Look at Joseph. At 17, he had a dream of greatness. He saw himself as a leader with authority over nations. But before the dream became reality, he had to go through the process. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. Every step of the way, it seemed like he was moving further from the dream rather than closer to it. But in reality, he was moving forward. Because preparation is forward progress, even when it doesn't look like it. Joseph was being prepared in Potiphar's house. He was learning how to manage resources, how to lead with integrity, how to trust God in difficulty. He was being prepared in prison. He learned patience, humility, and how to handle rejection. By the time Pharaoh elevated him to second in command over Egypt, he was ready. If God had put him in that position before he went through the preparation, he wouldn't have had the wisdom to handle the responsibility. We love the stories of people stepping into their calling, but we often forget the years of hidden preparation that came before. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel. Jesus spent 30 years in preparation for a 3-year ministry. Paul spent years in training before he became the great apostle we know today. The pattern is clear. Preparation precedes promotion. What if the thing you're praying for requires a version of you that doesn't exist yet? What if the opportunity you desire demands a level of discipline, character, and faith that God is still forming in you? It's not that God doesn't want to bless you. It's that he wants you to be ready for the blessing. Sometimes we see preparation as punishment. We think God is holding us back, delaying us, keeping us in the same place while everyone else moves forward. But what if the waiting season is actually a growing season? What if God is using this time to equip you with exactly what you need for what's ahead? Think about an athlete. Before they ever step onto the field in a championship game, they go through intense training. They lift weights, run drills, and endure grueling practice sessions. No one sees them in the early mornings and late nights, sweating, struggling, pushing through exhaustion. But that's where the real work happens. By the time they enter the game, they're not just hoping they can handle it. They know they can because they've been prepared. God is doing the same with you. He's strengthening your faith in the secret place. He's developing your endurance in the quiet seasons. He's teaching you to be faithful with little so that when he gives you much, you don't waste it. Maybe right now, you're feeling stuck in a place you don't want to be. Maybe you've been praying for a new job, a breakthrough, an opportunity, but nothing is changing. Instead of asking God, why aren't you promoting me? Start asking God, what are you preparing me for? Because when God prepares you first, he positions you next. We see the same principle in nature. A seed doesn't become a tree overnight. When you plant a seed, it first has to be buried. It spends time in the soil, in the darkness, to the outside world, it looks like nothing is happening. But underground, roots are forming, a foundation is being built, the seed is being prepared for the growth that's coming. If you dig it up too soon, you kill its potential. But if you let the process play out in due time, it will sprout, it will grow, and it will bear fruit. What if your current season is not a setback, but a setup? What if everything you're going through is God's way of strengthening you for what's next? The Bible says in Galatians 6:9, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. There's a proper time for the harvest, but only if we don't quit in the preparation phase. David didn't become king overnight. Joseph didn't step into leadership instantly. Moses didn't lead Israel immediately. And Jesus himself went through years of preparation before stepping into his public ministry. If God takes time to prepare his chosen ones, why would we think he would skip that process for us? So don't despise the season you're in. Don't rush the process. Instead, embrace the preparation because God is getting you ready for something greater. Your promotion is coming. But first, God prepares you. We often mistake waiting for being forgotten. When things don't happen as quickly as we expect, we start to question if God even heard our prayers. But just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. God is not bound by our timelines, and his delays are never without purpose. Sometimes what feels like a delay is actually God's preparation process. He is not just setting things up for you, he is setting you up for them. Think about Joseph. At 17 years old, he had a dream that he would be a ruler, that he would have authority and influence. But instead of stepping into that dream, he was thrown into a pit by his own brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and imprisoned. Every step of the way, it seemed like he was moving further away from the promise, not closer. If Joseph had judged God's faithfulness based on his circumstances, he would have thought the dream was dead. But God was not denying Joseph's future. He was developing Joseph for it. Joseph had gone straight from being a 17-year-old shepherd boy to ruling Egypt. He wouldn't have been ready. He needed time to grow. He needed to develop leadership skills, resilience, and wisdom. God used the delays in Joseph's life to prepare him for the destiny that was coming. When Pharaoh finally called him to interpret a dream, Joseph was ready, not because he had waited idly, but because he had allowed the delay to refine him. Waiting is never wasted when God is in control. We see delay as a denial, but God sees it as development. If he gave us everything we wanted the moment we asked for it, we wouldn't appreciate it. Worse yet, we might not even be able to handle it. I even met a man like this in Babylon. Anyway, we didn't know Jesus would be that great. There are times when we think we're ready, but God knows we still need more time. He's protecting us from stepping into something prematurely. Just like a fruit that is picked too soon will be bitter and useless, stepping into something before the right time can lead to frustration and failure. David is another example. He was anointed as king when he was still a teenager, but instead of immediately stepping onto the throne, he went back to tending sheep. And even after he gained recognition by defeating Goliath, he still had to run for his life as Saul, the current king, tried to kill him. David spent years hiding in caves, running from his enemies, and wondering when God's promise would come to pass. But every moment of that waiting was preparing him for the responsibility of leadership. He was learning to trust God in uncertainty. He was developing patience and endurance. He was gaining experience in leading people through difficult circumstances. When he finally became king, he wasn't just a warrior. He was a man after God's own heart, shaped by the delays he endured. Many of us struggle with waiting because we live in a world of instant gratification. We want things to happen quickly, and when they don't, we assume something is wrong. But the things that truly matter take time. A strong tree doesn't grow overnight. It spends years developing roots beneath the surface before anyone sees its full height. A skilled surgeon doesn't get to operate just because they have a desire to help people. They go through years of training, tests, and practice before they are trusted with the responsibility. God follows the same principle with us. He allows us to go through seasons where it feels like nothing is happening because he is building our roots. Sometimes we need to be delayed so that God can do something within us. Maybe we're praying for a promotion, but God knows we need to develop patience and leadership first. Maybe we're praying for a relationship, but God knows we still need healing and growth before we can be ready to love someone well. Maybe we're praying for a big opportunity, but God knows that if he gave it to us now, we wouldn't be able to sustain it. God's delays are not his denials. He's not saying no, he's saying not yet because I love you too much to give you something before you're ready. Moses had a dream of delivering Israel from slavery, but when he tried to do it in his own strength, he failed. He had to spend 40 years in the wilderness before God called him back. Can you imagine waiting 40 years for something? Most of us get impatient after 40 days. But in those years of waiting, God was preparing Moses. He was humbling him. He was teaching him how to lead. By the time Moses stood before Pharaoh, he wasn't just a man with a passion. He was a man with God's power. Waiting seasons are never wasted seasons. God is working behind the scenes in ways we cannot see. When you think about a farmer, he doesn't plant seeds and then get frustrated because he doesn't see a harvest the next day. He knows there's a process. He knows that growth happens underground before it becomes visible. The same is true in our lives. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes the greatest growth happens in the places we can't yet see. One of the greatest mistakes we can make is trying to rush God's timing. When we force things before they are ready, we end up frustrated and burned out. Abraham and Sarah were promised a son, but when it didn't happen quickly enough, they took matters into their own hands. Instead of waiting on God, they tried to make it happen in their own way, and it led to unnecessary heartache. We do the same thing when we get tired of waiting. We start forcing relationships that aren't right, taking jobs we know aren't for us, or stepping into things before we're prepared. But every time we try to take control, we end up delaying God's best. If you're in a season where it feels like you're waiting, don't get discouraged. Trust that God is doing something in you before he does something for you. He is using this time to refine you, strengthen you, and prepare you for what's ahead. What looks like a delay is actually divine preparation. God is aligning things in your favor. He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating details you don't even know about yet. In Galatians 6:9, the Bible says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." The proper time is coming. If you stay faithful, if you keep trusting, if you allow God to prepare you, there will be a harvest. You will look back and realize that the waiting was worth it. Because with God, delayed doesn't mean denied. It means he is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. So don't despise the waiting, embrace it. Because when the time is right, nothing and no one can stop what God has prepared for you. We live in a world that celebrates visibility. Success is often measured by how many people know your name, how many followers you have, or how much recognition you receive. But God's way is different. He develops people in obscurity before he reveals them in the spotlight. Some of the greatest leaders in the Bible spent years hidden before they were ever seen. Their training ground was not a platform. It was the quiet, unseen places where no one was applauding, no one was watching, and no one was praising them. David is a perfect example. Before he was a king, before he was a warrior, before anyone knew his name, he was just a shepherd in the field. When the prophet Samuel came looking for the next king, David wasn't even in the room. His own family didn't see him as important enough to be included, but God did. Even after Samuel anointed him, David went back to tending sheep. It didn't make sense. He had the calling, he had the promise, yet he was still in the field. What was God doing? He was preparing him. In the field, David learned how to fight battles no one saw. He fought lions and bears in secret before he ever faced Goliath in public. If David had never learned to defeat enemies in private, he wouldn't have had the confidence to take down a giant in front of an army. The battles no one sees are what prepare us for the victories everyone will see. God often puts us in seasons where we feel overlooked, but those are the very places where he is building something deep inside of us. Joseph also experienced a season of obscurity. As a young man, he had a dream of leadership. But before that dream became reality, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and put in prison. For years, he was unseen and forgotten. But during that time, God was shaping his character. Joseph learned to lead while serving in Potiphar's house. He learned to manage resources in prison. He learned wisdom and patience in the place where no one saw him. By the time he stood before Pharaoh, he wasn't just a dreamer. He was a man who had been developed through difficulty. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into his calling. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace with influence, status, and power, but God had to remove him from the spotlight so he could prepare him in solitude. Moses thought his season of impact was over, but God was just getting started. In the wilderness, he learned to depend on God, to lead with humility, and to hear God's voice clearly. If Moses had never spent those years alone, he wouldn't have had the strength to lead a nation. Even Jesus embraced a season of obscurity. Before he ever performed a miracle, before he ever preached to crowds, he spent 30 years in preparation. The Son of God, the Savior of the world, spent decades in the background before stepping into his ministry. And even after he was baptized, before beginning his public work, the Spirit led him into the wilderness. Why? Because the wilderness was his training ground. It was in the quiet, unseen place that he overcame temptation, strengthened his resolve, and prepared for the mission ahead. We often resist obscurity because we think it means we are being overlooked. We see others being promoted, recognized, and elevated while we feel stuck. But what if the place where no one sees you is the very place God is preparing you? What if the delay is actually development? What if the hidden season is where your foundation is being strengthened so that when God does elevate you, you don't collapse under the weight of the calling? God will never put you in a position that your character cannot sustain. We often want the results without the refinement, but true greatness is built in the secret place. A tree doesn't grow strong because of what's seen above the ground. It's strong because of the roots that grow beneath the surface. The deeper the roots, the higher the tree can grow. If the roots are weak, the tree will fall. The same is true for us. If God took you straight to the platform without preparing you in private, you wouldn't have the strength to stay there. Obscurity is not punishment, it's preparation. The problem is that we confuse being hidden with being forgotten. Just because no one sees you right now doesn't mean God isn't working. He is growing something in you that will be revealed at the right time. The things you are learning in this season will be the very things that sustain you in the next one. A diamond is formed under pressure, but before it shines, it's hidden deep underground. It goes through years of refinement before it is ever displayed. Gold is purified in fire before it is valuable. The most valuable things are often hidden before they are revealed. If God has you in a hidden season, trust that he is refining you, strengthening you, and preparing you for what's coming. The question is, can you be faithful in obscurity? Can you serve when no one is watching? Can you stay committed when no one is praising you? Can you remain disciplined when it feels like your efforts don't matter? Because what you do in the unseen places determines whether you are ready for what God has next. David didn't wait to be king to act like one. He led while he was still a shepherd. Joseph didn't wait until he was in the palace to be faithful. He served with excellence in Potiphar's house and in prison. Moses didn't wait until he stood before Pharaoh to grow in faith. He learned obedience in the wilderness. Jesus didn't wait until he was in front of crowds to walk in his calling. He spent years in private preparing for his purpose. What you do in obscurity is what will qualify you for promotion. Too many people want the platform without the process. But if you skip the preparation, you won't be able to handle the position. God is not just preparing the opportunity for you, he is preparing you for the opportunity. So if you feel unseen, unrecognized, or forgotten, take heart. You are not in a season of neglect. You are in a season of growth. This is your training ground. This is where God is shaping you for the next level. The work he is doing in you now will be the foundation for what he will do through you later. God hides you before he reveals you. He prepares you before he promotes you. He develops you before he displays you. So embrace the season you're in. Be faithful in the unseen places. Serve with excellence even when no one is watching. Stay committed even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because when the time is right, God will bring you out of obscurity and into the place he has prepared for you. And when that moment comes, you'll realize that every hidden season was worth it. Because God's training ground is never wasted. It is always part of his greater plan. When God is preparing you for something greater, one of the first things he does is refine your character. He is not just concerned about where he has taken you. He is concerned about who you are when you get there. God does not want to elevate someone whose character cannot sustain the weight of the calling. Talent might open a door, but only character can keep it open. Success without integrity is temporary. This is why God takes time to shape your heart before he gives you the platform. Look at Joseph. He had the gift of interpreting dreams, but if he had stepped into leadership without the process of refinement, his pride would have destroyed him. When he was young, he had a vision of his future, but instead of handling it with humility, he flaunted it before his brothers. He wasn't mature enough to carry the weight of his calling. So what did God do? He allowed Joseph to go through trials that would shape his character. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Each challenge refined him, stripping away immaturity and developing humility, patience, and faithfulness. By the time Joseph stood before Pharaoh, he was no longer the arrogant young man who bragged about his dreams. He was a wise and humble leader, ready to steward the responsibility God had for him. David also had to go through a refining process. He was anointed as king as a teenager, but before he ever wore a crown, he spent years on the run from Saul. During this time, he had opportunities to take matters into his own hands. Twice, he had the chance to kill Saul and take the throne by force. But instead of acting out of impatience or pride, David chose integrity. He refused to shortcut the process, saying, I will not lay my hand on the Lord's anointed. It's almost Samuel 24:6. That moment revealed his true character. He trusted that if God had anointed him, then God would be the one to elevate him at the right time. Refinement is not an easy process. It often comes through difficulty, pressure, and testing, just like gold is purified in fire. Our character is developed through challenges. God will allow situations that test our patience, humility, and faithfulness. It's in those moments that what's really inside of us comes to the surface. When things don't go our way, do we still trust him? When people mistreat us, do we still walk in love? When doors don't open as quickly as we hope, do we remain faithful where we are? The refining process reveals what needs to be removed so that we can step into the next level without carrying things that will weigh us down. Moses had to go through a refining process before leading Israel. He had a calling to be a deliverer, but early in his life, he tried to fulfill that calling in his own strength. When he saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite, he killed the man. He was acting out of impulse rather than wisdom, trying to force his destiny instead of trusting God's timing. As a result, he fled to the wilderness, where he spent 40 years in obscurity. That season humbled him. It stripped away self-reliance and taught him to depend on God. By the time God called him at the burning bush, Moses was no longer the impulsive, prideful man who thought he could do it alone. He was a man who understood that without God, he was nothing. One of the greatest indicators of character is how we handle pressure. Do we compromise when things get tough, or do we stand firm? Look at Daniel. He was taken from his home, placed in a foreign land, and pressured to conform to a culture that did not honor God. But despite the opposition, he refused to compromise. When he was told to eat food that violated his convictions, he remained faithful. When a law was passed that forbade prayer to God, he didn't waver. Even when he was thrown into the lion's den, his faith did not shake. His character had been tested and refined, and because of that, God elevated him to a position of great influence. Jesus himself went through a refining process. Before he began his ministry, he was led into the wilderness to be tested. Satan offered him shortcuts. Turn stones into bread. Throw yourself down and let the angels catch you. Bow down and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. Each temptation was an opportunity to bypass the process, to gain the reward without going through the refining. But Jesus refused. He understood that true promotion comes from God, not from shortcuts. His character was proven in the wilderness before he ever stepped into the miracles, the crowds, and the ministry. God will often use waiting seasons to refine our character. We might feel ready for the next level, but he sees what still needs to be developed. Maybe we need to learn humility before we are given influence. Maybe we need to develop patience before we are entrusted with leadership. Maybe we need to grow in faithfulness before we are given more responsibility. If we try to skip the process, we will end up with opportunities that our character is not strong enough to sustain. Character is built in the unseen moments, when no one is watching, when there's no applause, when it's just you and God. It's built in how we treat people who can do nothing for us. It's built in how we respond to criticism, how we handle disappointment, how we deal with temptation. If we can be trusted with small things, God will trust us with greater things. But if we are unfaithful in the little, we won't be ready for more. Proverbs 17:03 says, "The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart." God is far more interested in shaping who you are than in giving you what you want. Because if he develops your character first, then when he opens the door, you will be able to walk through it and stay there. So if you feel like you're in a refining season, don't resist it, embrace it. The delays, the challenges, the tests, they are not meant to break you. They are meant to build you. God is removing what doesn't belong, strengthening what needs to be developed, and preparing you for the next level. Refinement is not about punishment, it's about preparation. The very thing you are going through now is shaping you for what God has next. And when the time is right, when your character has been strengthened, when your heart is fully surrendered, God will elevate you, not because you forced it, but because you were ready. Let God refine you now, so that when the promotion comes, you will not only step into it, you will thrive in it. Because when God prepares you first, he ensures that you can carry the blessing without it crushing you. God never rushes the process of preparation because he knows that who you become is more important than how quickly you arrive. Every season of waiting, every moment of obscurity, every challenge you faced, it's all been part of his plan to shape you, refine you, and prepare you for what's ahead. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize that nothing was wasted. Joseph's prison led to his promotion. David's years in the field made him a king after God's own heart. Moses' time in the wilderness shaped him into a deliverer. Jesus' testing in the wilderness prepared him for his purpose. In every great story, there is a season of preparation before the promise is fulfilled. So if you're in a season where you feel delayed, overlooked, or tested, take heart. God is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He is building your strength, shaping your character, and deepening your faith. He is teaching you to trust his timing, not your own. And when the moment is right, when you are truly ready, he will open doors that no one can shut. The promotion is coming. The breakthrough is coming. The opportunity is coming. But when it does, you won't just be stepping into it, you will be ready for it. Because God never takes someone to a higher place without first ensuring they have the foundation to stand there. So trust the process. Be faithful where you are. Keep growing, keep believing, and keep preparing. Because when God prepares you first, nothing can stop what he has planned for you.